For the safety of listeners at home, following guidelines specified by the MPAA for film as a baseline, the following reading will be rated PG for scenes of fantasy violence and some dark imagery. The text read comes from a slightly earlier version of the novel. As such, wording may be different in certain places compared to the final published text. However, the author has endeavored to make sure that the reading and the novel are as close as possible. The Knight and the Unicorn. Chapter 3. The Task of the Berries. Renewed and reinvigorated, Tristan left the meadow and traveled along the path again until he came to a split he did not notice before. He quickly recognized some of his own footsteps in the mud and dust down one path and used that to determine the new route he needed to take. Following the unicorn's directions, Tristan took out his cross pendant and wrapped the cord around his wrist. He took hold of his walking stick with both hands before cautiously making his way deeper into the forests. It wasn't long before the golden light of the meadow was quickly covered once again by thick trees, and the path grew narrow in the thick underbrush. The woods in this direction were astoundingly quiet, and not a sound could be heard whenever Tristan stopped to check his surroundings. But Tristan saw neither hide nor hair of anything around, and the silence of the woods mildly unnerved him. Despite this, Tristan was still moved to action by the plight of Rosalind and the help from the unicorn Serena. Tristan felt reasonably comfortable that the unicorn would keep Rosalind safe, and at least she was keeping Rosalind from succumbing to the enchantress's poisons and curses. Keeping the two well in mind, Tristan kept trekking through the woods, determined to help Serena and equally determined to get Rosalind back. Not even the darkness of the woods could keep out the lightness of hope brought to him by the unicorn's words. After a while, the woods lightened a bit. They were no longer so dark and gloomy. While they were still thick, speckled light fell down through the branches and lit the way a little more. The bushes lightened, and the trees didn't seem so oppressive or claustrophobic. Tristan almost could have felt jaunty by the sight. The unicorn's assurance and belief that he went unnoticed still encouraged him, despite the fact that he seemed to be going further into danger. Serena sounded knowledgeable and skilled, and if she knew how to bring Rosalind back, Tristan was willing to do whatever she asked. She was also kind and helpful, and Tristan was thankful she was an ally, and her meadow could provide him with a sort of shelter in these otherwise untamed woods. And if Serena knew the doings of the enchantress, even if only slightly, he had a leg up, and might have gained a head start on his quest before she knew he was there. The further he got along the trail, however, the more it seemed like something was watching him. It almost sounded as though there was a second set of footsteps that mimicked Tristan's own, though always keeping out of sight whenever Tristan stopped to look around. Tristan wondered if Serena wasn't keeping a protective barrier that allowed him to get to the meadow without being noticed, but exposed him whenever he left. Serena's words about a potential familiar wandering around also came back into Tristan's mind, especially when he realized he was going in the direction Serena mentioned was closer to the enchantress's dwelling. More unnerving was the faint idea the second set of footsteps was coming nearer. He wished Serena had come along with him to keep him safe, even though she had insisted neither she nor Rosalind could leave. Tristan decided he needed to make headway in case someone was preparing magic and he needed to be out of range. Picking a spot in the path where there was no knot threatening to trip him over, Tristan broke into a run only to hear the sound of the footsteps increasing much faster. He bolted over a small hill and ducked underneath a large tree that had fallen across the path. The footsteps receded, but only gradually, and Tristan leapt across some wide stones over a river and into a knot of woods slightly off the main path. There he stopped to gather his breath in a small open area. But the footsteps were hot on his tail, and Tristan had to run again before he'd fully caught his breath. He ran across the path, going up into the hills again, and made his way down and backwards, hoping to throw his pursuer off by making it look like he was leaving. The footsteps ran further into the woods, almost sounding like they passed by him without noticing, and Tristan continued to run down the hill and away. Tristan was heaving and panting and soon realized he needed to hide. He couldn't keep running for much longer, no matter how much energy the food and drink had given him. Tristan ran back to the path and examined his surroundings. He soon found a large rock formation with a small hollowed-out area dug underneath it, with a small hole perfect for looking out onto the path. Tristan quickly scrambled off the path and around the rock formation and quickly hid himself in the hollow, taking a few nearby broken pine branches and using them to block the way under the rock. Tristan sat underneath the rock, panting and trying to control his breathing. He waited until he was mostly calm before opening his water canteen and drinking some of it. The cool water felt good going down his throat and seemed to steady his nerves. He took a few deep breaths and drank from it again before placing his eye to the opening in the formation. The forest was silent once again. Tristan was well hidden in the hollow under the rock, and the smell of pine and oak branches on the side almost completely masked his scent. Tristan looked around using the hole in the rocks and found nothing going up or down the path. He also looked around the woods on his side of the hollow and saw nothing wandering around the woods. It was a long time before Tristan decided to move. The sun had slowly advanced in its course compared to when he left the glade, but still hung high in the sky. It was this passing of time that made Tristan realize he had to move. He didn't know how far he had gone from Serena's meadow, and it would likely take him a long time to return after gaining the berry from the briar patch. If the unicorn's meadow was the only place of safety in these woods, he certainly wanted to be back there before nightfall, if at all possible. Slowly and carefully, Tristan removed the branches until there was a small space, just enough for him to exit the hollow under the rock. He gripped his walking stick in his hand and double-checked the cross pendant to make sure it was firmly around his wrist, then crawled out of the hollow. He stood himself upright and walked around the rock, prepared to continue down the path. Something was now in his way. Before him stood another unicorn, but this one was pitch black as night, with dark blue horn and hooves, tinged with hints of silver like distant starlight, and deep blue eyes that looked like a raging ocean. Its nostrils flared, and it snorted and pawed the ground as it looked at Tristan, and often had its head down like it was ready to charge him at any moment. Another one, Tristan thought to himself. He wondered if he was really awake, if he had not just fallen asleep in the meadow he found Rosalind, and had been dreaming this whole thing. All the same, he picked up his walking stick with both hands and prepared to defend himself in case it wasn't as friendly as Serena. It certainly didn't look so fair. "Who are you?" Tristan said. "What do you want from me?" "A worthy question," the dark unicorn said, giving Tristan a slight feeling of having been in this situation before. The masculine voice was deep and unnervingly calm, and Tristan felt as though something was trying to invade his mind whenever it spoke. "Who am I indeed? But more importantly, who am I to you? I could see the look on your face as though you have recently awoken, and cannot tell the difference between reality and dreams." This one seemed to be reading his mind if it knew what he thought of it, a sign to Tristan that not all was well here. He grunted in defiance and held up the cross pendant on his wrist toward the unicorn. "Get out of my way," he said as forcefully as could. "Whoever, or whatever you are, I don't have time for riddles." The unicorn looked at the pendant without so much as flinching and turned back to Tristan. "Riddles are a key to the mind, however," he said, coming forward a few steps. "The better one can answer such questions, the more likely one is able to see the detail in things. Tell me, young man, why are you here? These forests are dark and bewitched with foul magic and creatures. You are better off at home." Tristan stepped back once as the unicorn approached, but held his ground. It must be a familiar of the enchantress that haunts these woods to know so much about them. He gripped his walking stick with both hands and pointed it at the unicorn like a lance. "If you are the one who poisoned my beloved Rosalind, then I will do my best to break your neck." "I? You think I am the one who poisoned the young woman?" The unicorn sounded almost like he was amused more than panicked by Tristan's threats, despite the young man being of formidable strength. "Perhaps your dream is deeper already than you thought it was." "Quit talking about dreams," Tristan said. "I'll bash you over the head if you don't move." "'Tis a surprise, then, that you did not do that to my twin." At the mention of the only other unicorn he knew, Tristan was caught off guard, enough that he nearly dropped the walking stick. "What do you know about Rosalind?" he asked, this time more surprised than aggressive. "I know that courage takes many forms, but impulse can be twisted to the benefit of one smart enough to notice it in others," the dark unicorn said. "It is simultaneously a brave yet dangerous thing you did coming into these woods. A wiser man would look and say you are foolish, but your impulse will either be your damnation or your salvation." "Damnation? Salvation? What the heck are you talking about?" "You're presented with a choice. 2 paths lie ahead of you. One will lead to you exiting these woods alive with your Rosalind in tow. The other will condemn you simply to be the next in line. Tristan, heed the warnings of Soren, the sorcerer of these woods. The path to condemnation will seem easier, but do not lose your focus or resolve." At the word sorcerer, Tristan almost rose up and attacked the unicorn, thinking he had a connection to the sorceress of the woods. He merely steadied his grip again and kept a careful distance, watching him carefully. "I have already found a chance at salvation," Tristan said, getting progressively more irritated with the dark unicorn once again. "If I can find the berries I need, I will be able to start curing Rosalind of the curse inflicted on her." "Oh," Soren said, as though understanding much more than simply what Tristan had told him. "I see that someone has given you some advanced knowledge. But tell me, Tristan, how much of the truth did they tell you?" How do you know my name? Tristan barked. How am I supposed to trust you if you hardly tell me anything about who you are, or why you're here, or why you're pursuing me? All fair responses, the unicorn replied before Tristan could say any more, walking over to Tristan's side as if to go around him. But let me ask you this. The one who offered this solution, did they tell you the briars you must go to find the berry in are a more deadly variety of the poisonous Solanaceae? Tristan dropped his walking stick. The word was mentioned often among those who entered the woods for berry picking, though not with kind implications. Nightshades? He asked. But no, I didn't know. I thought so. Then again, it seems to me like you might not have bothered to ask in the first place. Blind trust is as bad as impulse or quick temper, perhaps worse. The unicorn walked around in back of Tristan, but stopped again. Tristan turned to face him as he walked to a place where Tristan had been hiding behind the rock, beginning to wonder if there was something else Serena had not told him he should have been aware of. And yet he soon realized what Serena didn't tell him began with the strange new unicorn. Our time is nearly over for now, Soren said. I have things I must attend to. That being said, I wish for you to eventually choose the path of salvation, and will come back at a later time to see if you walk it. Until then, take my parting gift. Under the rock you tried to use to hide from me, something else is hidden. You will find a set of armor that will neither bend nor break under pressure, to protect your stout heart, and keep it focused on the journey to come. Tristan was confused, but something seemed to click in his mind. I am no knight. I am merely here to save Rosalind from the Enchantress. All the knight needs is someone to save and something to protect, Soren said. He turned around once again until he was facing away and down the path, away from the hills. Keep this in mind, and eventually you will rock the road of salvation. The dark unicorn trotted down the path and around the bend, but when Tristan ran after her and calling his name, he himself turned the bend and could not see the unicorn anywhere. Just as he arrived, Soren had vanished without a trace and without a sound. Despite his mysterious interest and exit, the dark unicorn had given much for Tristan to ponder over. Over whether or not to trust Soren, Tristan decided looking for the armor was a good enough place to start. If it was there, he would keep in mind the words of the dark unicorn, and see what more information he could glean in their next meeting. If not, then his only ally would be Serena. Tristan hesitated to see if the armor was still there. Heading back to the rock, he touched the surface while still on the road and nearly passed it by. Something pulled him towards getting the berries, but curiosity and suspicion over the words of the dark unicorn eventually drew Tristan back around to the hollow under the rock. He climbed down in and looked around. There, where his foot had kicked aside a bit of dirt when he first scrambled in, Tristan found the sheen of metal. The discovery of the metal set off something in Tristan. He pounced at the ground and dug like one possessed. More and more earth flew out of the hollow as Tristan worked at the ground with his bare hands. By the time he was done, a whole set of fine steel armor was unearthed. The armor consisted of a chest piece, a set of leggings and arm bracers, a set of boots, and a set of gloves. Each was made of a light and durable metal that shone like steel and was surprisingly flexible when worn, and yet when Tristan poked at it with his walking stick it remained firm like diamond. Each was colored dark blue with silver edges, and looked like the lost armor of some royal house. Part of Tristan's mind considered the act of picking up this armor and using it for himself as stealing. Part of it said this could have been a trap that Serena mentioned, and the armor could potentially be cursed in and of itself. But another part of his mind realized this was a confirmation of the darker unicorn's words, and he would do well to listen to it. So he unearthed the whole set, brushed the dirt off of them, and wore it. For a long time, Tristan didn't move after putting on the set of armor as he examined his sensations. It fit him comfortably, with plenty of room to breathe, and he was mostly protected except for his head and some small spaces where the armor pieces didn't quite connect. There was also no sign of illness or pain that could have been the effects of a curse. So Tristan stood up, walked out of the hollow, and took his walking stick and pendant up once again. The dark unicorn had given him a whole armor set. As strange as it was, Tristan did feel more powerful and more equipped to handle the dark woods ahead. Where before he had simply been wearing his farm clothes, Tristan was now wearing armor worthy of a knight, worthy of someone trying to protect Rosalind and complete the task ahead of him. The idea felt good, and Tristan resumed his walk through the woods feeling more confident, even as the trees began to close around him once again. The trees became so close that Tristan almost had to walk sideways like a crab. He squeezed himself over and through trees, and was soon thankful the armor was flexible as he jumped over a fallen log. Still he continued down the path, hoping to find the berries soon. Even worse were the sounds of yet another pursuer. This one was slow and deliberate, a rustling through the trees and branches that sounded like something crawling along the ground. Sometimes it even crossed in the canopy above him, but when Tristan looked up, he could see nothing there. If something tried to attack him there on the rougher path, there was no place to hide, and it would be difficult to run. Thankfully, the terrain evened out, and soon Tristan was walking in a near straight line. The path opened until he could walk normally again, and led to another lighter patch of forest. Tristan was grateful for the widened path, and quickly picked up his pace to try and get some distance between himself and the new pursuer. He nearly broke out into a run until he passed two thick and thorny bushes, one on either side of the path. These were likely the briar patches Serena told him the berries would be located near, and the poisonous thorns that Soren had warned him about. Tristan slowed down and took extra care as he slipped through the bushes into a small clearing. The thorny bushes surrounded the clearing in thick patches, and even more seemed to be found in the surrounding area. A few smaller patches were also growing in places around the clearing, and Tristan had to be careful where he stepped even with the boots. The clearing was not too wide, but rather long, with grass flattened and standing upright in odd patterns all around. On the other side was a large berry bush with multiple clumps of blue berries all around it. That has to be the berry Serena was talking about, Tristan said quietly to himself. I only hope the berries themselves aren't as poisonous as the briar around it. Soren didn't say so, only the thorns. Before he could get to the berries, Tristan suddenly tripped over a hole that a piece of the flattened grass had obscured from his view. Tristan toppled over and fell on the ground with a hard thump, and his armor rattled and clanked. He picked himself up and checked himself over, thankful the armor seemed to have not even taken a scratch. As he looked down and investigated the new armor, however, a realization began to dawn on him. He was standing in one of the patches of flattened grass. It seemed to create a long, almost U-shaped impression among the taller grass standing upright, and from Tristan's vantage point, appeared to make long, looping trails around the clearing. Rustling returned off to one side of the clearing. Tristan's mind went back and forth from the patches in the grass to the rustling. Tristan grabbed his walking stick with both hands, almost like a sword, and whirled around to face the rustling noise. Rising from an opening in the briar was a giant snake. It had a huge flat head like a python with two bright golden eyes that bore into Tristan and looked like they could see right through him. It was mostly green like the color of well-watered grass, but had multiple large spots of lighter green and smaller splotches of brown that made it almost blend in with the forest background around the clearing. Its body was almost wider than Tristan was. Its coil seemed to stretch endlessly into the forest behind it. Who dares to enter the home of Samohan? The giant snake hissed as it slowly entered the clearing and approached Tristan, raising its head up further and further until it towered over him. Who trespasses across my property? Tristan was at first shocked at the fact that the snake was around in these woods, much less that it could speak and he could understand it. The surprise soon passed as Tristan reasoned it could have been one of the Enchantress's familiars that Serena had warned him about, what might have been a smaller creature affected by magic to become that massive size. He steeled himself again and secured the cross on his wrist. And who are you that claims these woods? Tristan said, regaining his fire. This is the property of the guardian of the forest, and not that of some overgrown earthworm. The snake hissed scornfully at Tristan. You insolent mouse! The guardian of this place has long hidden itself. I have merely claimed unclaimed territory, and now you answer to me. So tell me, what is a knight doing without his sword and shield? Tristan realized the python was actually willing to listen to him. It swayed back and forth a few paces away from him, but did nothing. Besides, the snake was much bigger than he was, and fighting it was the last thing he wanted to do. I am no knight, but I have been bestowed a gift, he said carefully. I have come to collect a berry for my dear Rosalind, under the effects of a slow poison. I wish only to take 2 clumps of berry for her health and leave. I am not sympathetic to such causes, the python said indifferently. So far as I'm concerned, coming into my territory and stealing my things makes you no different than a thief. The guardian that has hidden itself one day will return, Tristan fired back, and so now you are a tenant that pays no rent. He stepped forward once into a patch of light shining through the branches, holding up the cross to the snake. You have no authority to tell me what I can and can't do here. The snake hissed and recoiled. Not because Tristan had threatened it, but because it had seen his armor. The guardian's own armaments, it nearly growled in rage. This territory is mine! Mine! And it lunged. Tristan had been on guard since the appearance of the snake and quickly jumped out of the way, allowing the snake to crash right into the ground. It swiftly picked itself back up and turned around. The python gave an angry hiss, but Tristan took the opportunity to give it a good whack across the head with his walking stick. Tristan soon realized he was at a supreme disadvantage. His walking stick wasn't going to do anything to the snake's thick hide. It merely seemed to have irritated the beast and made his next lunge harder and faster. The walking stick was no weapon for a warrior, even if it was enchanted never to break. He had to get the berries and get out before the snake could grab hold of him with its sharp fangs and a massive tail. Tristan tried hopping around the snake to get closer to the berries. The python just as quickly saw through his plan and slithered in between Tristan and the berries. With a flick of its coils, it hissed Tristan hard like a battering ram and flung him halfway across the clearing, knocking away his walking stick and almost knocking the wind out of him. Tristan ended up with his face next to one of the dangerous poisonous thorns and quickly rolled away so he wouldn't accidentally hurt himself. The walking stick might not be a good weapon, but it was what Tristan had. He tried crawling along the ground towards it, hoping the snake was slower than he looked. He soon felt something smooth and scaly around his legs, and his vision began to twist and turn. Tristan was being rolled up by the snake and locked in the tightening coils, already thick around his legs. One arm was free above his head, but the rest of his body was covered in green coils, cool and smooth where he felt them outside of the armor, and tightening around him with deadly force. Either Tristan would run out of breath, or the snake would eat him alive. "The mouse is more a rat," the python said proudly. "This one had more bite than what usually passes through here. All the same, his prey well earned and well caught." Tristan held his breath as the python coils closed in closer and closer around him. He hoped to hold off the inevitable suffocation even just a little bit longer. Maybe Serena would see he was in danger and come drive it away. Even Soren would be a tiny bit of a hopeful presence, even if Tristan wasn't sure he could do anything. "I can't fail Rosalind," Tristan thought to himself. "Oh, Rosalind, I promised to get you out of there. I don't know how. Unable to hold his breath any longer, Tristan exhaled, coughing and sputtering, as the python's coils tightened further and further and threatened to break his bones. Only he could still breathe freely. "What is this?" the python exclaimed, sounding like it was trying not to panic. The snake tried squeezing again, only for Tristan to hear the light scraping of metal on metal from the armor. "You are no rat! You have a shell like a turtle with the strength of an armadillo! What even are you?" The surprise that Tristan was still breathing normally took the both of them off guard. The snake's coil suddenly froze in place, and Tristan could do nothing but think with relief how he wasn't dead yet. The realization he was still in danger of the snake and its fangs came to Tristan faster than that of the snake realizing Tristan was still an active threat. So did the thought that there was a thorny bush not too far behind the snake's head. Quick as a flash, Tristan reached down to the ground and grabbed the nearby walking stick. Tristan held it as steady as he could, and in his one-handed grip he began to thrust it down on top of the big python's head. The tail went quick as lightning towards the free hand, but not fast enough. The sturdy stick banged against the python's head, and the tail suddenly went askew as the python became dizzy. Tristan hit the big snake again. The coils began to loosen, and the python swayed as though drunk, still trying to keep Tristan in its vision and trying to attack him. It tried one desperate final lunge. The lunge only played into Tristan's newfound advantage. Holding the stick as tight as he could with both of his newly freed hands, he swung it as hard as he could towards the ground. The python's big head sailed by him and crashed right into a patch of the thorn bushes. The poisonous thorns pierced the hide, and the snake rolled around and hissed in pain, shaking Tristan around like a tambourine until finally he shook free of the python's grip and tumbled onto the grass, dazed but not harmed. Tristan quickly recovered and with one final blow struck the python's head and sent it sailing into the large thorn bush behind it. The giant snake hissed one last time, and the flailing, thrashing coils gave a final pitiful shake. The python's head was scratched from the crash, and the great big golden eyes were pierced almost directly by a thorn. The light soon vanished from the eyes, and the great snake was vanquished. Tristan at first just stared at the snake for a long time. Eventually he stroked the coils once, as though wondering if it was truly dead. He'd never killed something so large before. He'd ran at a lone wolf that was breaking into the animal pens on the farm, and once shot a deer with his father's crossbow that broke in to eat the wheat stalks. The giant snake was something so large, and likely filled with strange magic said to inhabit those woods, that it astounded him he was able to defeat it at all. Much more to his surprise was the fact that he was able to escape the coils. He thought about it for a long while, until the words of Soren the Dark Unicorn came to him. "You will find a set of armor that will neither bend nor break under pressure, to protect your stout heart and keep it focused on the journey to come. As soon as he thought of Rosalind, the armor had tightened and become as inflexible and unbreakable as a piece of diamond, and it prevented the python from strangling him. The armor had proved its worth, and at the same time had proven Soren a trustworthy ally. Thinking of Rosalind once again, Tristan carefully climbed over the coils and went to the berry bush. The bush was free of thorns and other pests, and Tristan carefully plucked 1 clump of 4 berries and 1 clump of 3 berries off the bush. They rested neatly in his palm and smelled almost like ripe blueberries with a pleasantly sweet odor that was neither overpowering nor tinged with a foul aftertaste. These would likely be safe to eat, and thus safe for Rosalind to consume. His prize in hand, Tristan returned down the path from whence he came. No longer pursued by footsteps of any kind, the journey was easier and cleaner than it was before. He clambered over the hollow logs with ease and broke into a run down the hill. Tristan passed the hollow where the armor had been and crossed the river, and came back into the lighter forest of the unicorn Serena. Tristan soon returned to the meadow and found Serena lying down next to Rosalind, not unlike a faithful dog. She picked herself up when she heard his approaching footsteps and gently trotted towards him. When Tristan got close enough that she could see his newfound armor, she suddenly stopped. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Tristan was not sure how much to tell Serena of Soren. Serena sounded almost suspicious and even threatened by the sight of the blue and silver metal. He quickly came up with a story he thought would be inconspicuous enough. "They were lying by the side of the road," he said. "Some other poor soul probably tried to face the enchantress and failed. If nothing else, it may come in use." Serena nodded. "The berries," the unicorn said quickly. "Do you have the berries?" Tristan, grateful she decided not to mention the armor again, brought them up from his bag and showed Serena the 2 clumps. "Excellent," Serena said. "Now give one to me so that my magic shall be strengthened, and gently crush the other berries in this vial," at which point she produced one from a hollow in the massive oak, and mixed it with water from the stream for Rosalind to drink. Tristan gave Serena the branch with 4 berries, and the unicorn ate them gratefully. As she ate the berries, Tristan did as Serena asked, crushing the berries with his fingers and letting the juice drip into the bottle. The juice filled the small glass vial about a third, and the rest of the vial was filled with water poured from Tristan's canteen. He shook the vial around to mix it and went over to Rosalind. Serena helped gently lift her up so that Tristan could pour the mixture down the young woman's throat. Despite her ill state, Rosalind thankfully managed to swallow the mixture with the help of Tristan and Serena. The unicorn used her magic to help massage it down her throat without her choking on it, as Tristan slowly poured it in one small mouthful at a time. At once the mixture took effect. Tristan pressed his ear to Rosalind's chest and heard her lungs already beginning to grow stronger. "She will not be cured completely," Serena said, "but we have gained a crucial foothold. The toxin will spread no further and should begin to abate." Tristan was only mildly consoled. He stood up and looked down at Rosalind. Serena stood up and walked over to him, watching him carefully. "There's still so much to do," Tristan said, feeling exhausted. "The berries have only done so much. And with what I have seen, and more with what I have done, it feels nearly impossible." The unicorn gently nuzzled her head against Tristan's neck so that he was looking up and at her. When she was certain that Tristan was paying attention to her, Serena gave as much of a smile as she could give with her horse-like mouth. "Do not lose hope, dear Tristan. You are stronger than you think." Then she began to sing. "Brave Tristan, sweet Tristan, with courage and might, slayed the snake in these woods in a fearful fight. In briar and bramble with poisonous thorn, the serpent outwitted, no more does his scorn. These dark woods beforehand claim many a foe, thine armor's protection won you the last blow. Your valor and courage shall take you quite far, so long as you keep them your vision won't mar. O brave knight, O sweet knight, wherever thou art, no foe is too large for the strength of thy heart. May the fire of love be ever in your eyes, till victory resounds and you've won your prize." The soft, clear voice soothed Tristan and made him feel revitalized. Serena's song did not just fill his ears, but spoke to his heart, his hopes, his dreams, his longings, his love. Sure, there was much to do before Rosalind could be healed completely, but the way did not feel as difficult as before. With Serena helping to keep Rosalind safe and Soren helping Tristan with his tasks, there was the possibility they would make it. There was the possibility Tristan could bring Rosalind home. All the same, Tristan felt weak. The adrenaline rush from finding the snake was wearing down. Though he was no longer depressed, he felt tired and exhausted even more than before. Serena noticed this. "Have some more of my herbs and berries," she said with warm concern, "and drink from the stream. You have done much today, so now rest here and regain your strength for tomorrow." You will be here longer than you planned, but with any luck you will come away with something no one else has ever done. You will bring Rosalind home." Tristan was uncomfortable with the idea of staying the night in the strange forests, but the sky around was the golden pink of evening, which made Serena's own color shine even more vividly, and the sky was turning a dark blue. Tristan realized he had no choice. Even going back to the town posed a risk of encountering the Enchantress or simply getting lost in the woods in the dark. And he was also afraid of finding something like the snake again. "You will be safe here," Serena said soothingly. "I will keep watch. The grass is soft, the air is sweet, and the weather will not get too cold here while I still have control of it. Lie under the tree, dream of being back home with Rosalind, and the night shall pass quickly enough. Tomorrow, we shall embark on the next stage." Tristan lay in the hollow he had constructed near Rosalind earlier, but he did not sleep right away. He lay awake and watched as the sky turned dark and the stars came out overhead. He watched Serena gently walk around the clearing, sounding like she was humming softly as the glade filled with a whole swarm of fireflies. The meadow was filled with a gentle light. The flowers around him filled the air with a heavy, sweet odor. The place was calm and peaceful, and Tristan was softly and gently lulled into a deep sleep. Here ends Chapter 3. Next week, The Knight and the Unicorn, Chapter 4.